Hi, my name's Lily. When I was in high school, my dad worked as a principal there, and I thought that it was the most horrible period of my life. But later he was fired, and when he found out that I was the one to blame, he didn't want to be my dad anymore. My mum died 2 years ago, and it was decided that it would be better for me to live with my grandmother for a little while. But pretty soon it became clear that it was hard for her to look after a teenager. So when I had only 1 year to go till I graduated, I moved in to live with my dad. From the very first day, I understood that it was going to be a tough year. You see, my dad was that type of man who always was very strict and merciless, so to speak. He believed that only severe punishment could change someone's attitude, so nobody liked him as the principal at my new school, and some were even scared of him. As for me, while teachers were trying to be nice, my schoolmates were far from being friendly. Nobody wanted to join me on school projects, and I would sit alone in the cafeteria during lunchtime. As well as that, for some reason, they thought I was overdoing it, while I was just being a good student. I didn't want my dad to know how badly I was treated, because if he got involved in it, things could get even worse. That's why I knew I had to deal with my problems myself. At first I tried to look, less smart, and submitted poorly done work on purpose. But the only thing that influenced was my grades, which got lower. When my dad found out about that, he began reprimanding me for being inattentive and even assumed that I had fallen in love and that it was depriving me of being able to study well. In reality, he wasn't totally wrong. For real, there was this one guy, Tim, who really made me feel nervous whenever I passed him in the hall. But he belonged to that group of guys who usually mocked me the most, so I definitely had no chance to grab his attention, in a romantic sense. And there was another important reason for me to get rid of the principal's daughter label. You know what they say, where there's a will, there's a way. And while I was scratching my head about what else I could do to realise my plan, I happened to appear in the right place at the right time. One day I got punished for my poor grades and I had to clean the classroom after a few chemistry labs. But as soon as I got to the door that was cracked a little bit open, I heard some voices that I was pretty sure belonged to Tim and the other guys from his group. Even though they were whispering, it was clear that they were discussing a prank that they were going to play on the principal, my father. Suddenly the door swung open, hitting me on the forehead so that I fell on the floor, and I saw Tim. For a few seconds we looked at each other eye to eye, and these were the most beautiful eyes that I had ever seen. But then the rest of the group appeared. One girl started saying that I had heard everything, and that I was going to tell my dad everything, and that they would be punished, and even offered to teach me a lesson for eavesdropping. Suddenly it hit me. This situation was probably my last chance to blend into the crowd. I promised that not only would I not tell anybody about their plan, but also I was willing to help with anything that I could. That girl looked at me suspiciously, and Tim winked at me, as if he wanted to say that it was a deal. The next day, we went to implement our plan. My task was to send a few texts from my dad's mobile phone to Rebecca's number, one of the girls from the group. The message was supposed to be obvious, something like, "I like you," and "Can you help improve my grades?" and other stuff like that. Then, after a few of these texts, she was supposed to go into the principal's office and start a scandal, having a camera in her purse, to record his stunned reaction. Was I thinking about what I would do if my dad knew everything that was going on? Not really. I was too focused on hanging around with a group of cool guys at school. In addition, Tim said that I was extremely brave for taking part in this, and that had immediately made him interested in me, so I was so excited about everything. However, our funny joke turned out to be far from the way we saw it play out, or at least, definitely not how I had intended. When Rebecca was already acting out her injured innocence scene in the principal's office, his secretary walked in. Rebecca couldn't admit that everything was just a joke, because she was afraid of being expelled. Dad's secretary had always been quite an unpleasant old woman. She took this and ran with it, promising to not keep quiet about it. So, long story short, after hearing in front of the disciplinary committee, it was decided that he would step down as principal so that the story didn't really go public. Dad was devastated. He couldn't find another school job in neighbouring towns and cities because there was no vacancies in the middle of the school year. And since the town we lived in was so small and there were simply no other schools there, the only job he could get was at a construction site, which apparently was quite different from the one he had gotten used to. I felt really sorry for my dad, especially since I knew exactly what had happened. But at the same time, I was no longer the principal's daughter, which definitely made my life at school easier. Even more, Tim and I began dating, and he continued to admire me and made me feel happy and inspired. Several months have passed since these occurrences, and I graduated from school and was already packing my stuff to go to college. But I still couldn't get rid of that bad aftertaste from this story. You know, Dad couldn't even show up at my graduation after all that. I think he got even more grey hairs on his head. But at the same time, I couldn't come up with an idea of how to tell him everything. And once again, the perfect chance came, all by itself. Dad and I went to the store to buy some stuff that I was going to take with me to college. And right there, between the parking spaces in front of the store, we came across Rebecca and her father. Apparently they were there for the same reason as my dad and I were. My dad immediately expressed his intention to go up and talk to Rebecca, but her dad was not aware of the situation. And believe me, nobody wanted him to be. I noticed that Rebecca was trying to drag her father the other way, and I followed her example. But my dad was like, "Come on, I have to ask her to tell me the truth." And I had no other option but to tell him that I could also tell him the truth. I don't know, I just burst into a stream of words and told my dad how hard it was for me at school at first, and then how I heard about Tim and the other guy's plan, and how I took an active part in making it happen. I was sorry for having ruined his career, but at the same time, I was glad that I had the opportunity to spend my last school year having friends and a boyfriend. I was only able to look into his eyes once I had finished talking. Dad looked shocked and angry at the same time. I noticed that the veins on his forehead had gotten swollen and that his hands were shaking. He didn't tell me anything and just put the shopping basket on the floor and left, leaving me alone. Honestly, I felt relieved after having dumped the load of that secret off of myself. I understood that he was insulted, but I was sure that he wouldn't stay angry for long. I got home much later that day, because after the store, I had to go meet with Tim and the guys to say goodbye before our departure. My flight was scheduled for the next day. It was dark everywhere, and when I switched on the light, I almost cried out from the surprise. I saw my dad sitting on the sofa, and judging upon the odour, I felt he had been drinking. That made me nervous and a little bit scared, because he never, ever had any issues with alcohol. I tried to talk to him, but he just told me to go to my room. The next day when I went downstairs with my whole life packed in my 2 huge suitcases, Dad was already in the kitchen and still didn't want to talk to me. I once again tried to apologise for what I had done back then, but he only put his arm forward, showing me that he was not in the mood for any conversation. We were still silent when he drove me to the airport, and I felt really uncomfortable being in the car with my dad, with all that tension around. I guess it was right then when I truly realised how badly I had hurt my dad, while I was trying to set up my own life. Dad didn't really accompany me. In fact, he didn't even get out of the car. I was standing there with my huge suitcases, waiting for at least a hug, or something. But Dad didn't even look at me. I heard the emotion in his voice, where he said that this was the last time we would ever see each other, and that he promised to pay for my education under one single circumstance, that I would never, ever come back home. Can you believe that? He abandoned me. My dad didn't want me to be his daughter anymore. There are no words to describe what I felt back then. I was crying during the whole flight. At first, I was hoping that when I got to my destination and called my dad, he'd already be fine. But he didn't even pick up the phone, nor did he answer my calls during the first week at college. when I kept calling him and leaving him messages several times a day. Since then, actually the one and only time when he did call me back was right before my break, when I left a message that I wanted to visit him at home and had already bought a ticket. He almost immediately called me back and said that I was no longer welcome there. That's it. For now, guys, I've already graduated from college, found a cool job, met a nice guy, and we're going to get married. But something tells me that my dad will not walk me down the aisle, because after all these years, he never forgave me. If you like this story, don't forget to click on the like button. Feel free to leave your comments below this video. I will read them all. Bye.